welcome to Conversations with the Candidates. It's WHCA's version of Conversations with the Candidates, where we bring folks in who are going to be on the ballot come November 6th. And today, joining us is Mr. Peter Tedeschi. Peter is a Republican candidate for the Massachusetts 9th Congressional District. And he's here to sit down and chat. Peter?
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
If you don't mind, we probably should start. I know that a lot of people know who you are, but there might be a few pockets of folks who don't know who you are.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm a lifelong resident of the South Shore. My wife, Kathy, and I have been lifelong residents and spent a lot of time growing up in Norwell. We now live in Marshfield. And I'm the former president and CEO of Tedeschi Food Shops. A lot of folks in the area may be familiar with my family's business. And, it's an area that's near and dear to my heart, one that I'm proud to call home and want to represent it the best way I can.
You know, it obviously you are successful as the former CEO of Tedeschi's Food Shops. Why run for office?
It's a great question. I get asked it all the time. A couple of things. First of all, when you take a look back, it's a way to give back. And a way to give back to an area I'm not only proud to call home, but one that has allowed my family to realize the American dream, starting with my grandparents, Catherine and Angelo. They came here at the turn of last century. So first and foremost, great way to give back. Secondly, like many of the folks that are probably watching the show, I'm very concerned with what I see going on Capitol Hill today. We've got polarity in our own government, partisan bickering, and we have too many elected officials, including the gentleman I'm running against, who seem more interested in doing the bidding of their party and the work of special interest groups than actually doing the work of the people. So, as I like to say, Kevin, look, we have two options here. We can complain about things, or we can do something about it. It's time to do something about it.
What was it like to assemble and launch a campaign of this size and magnitude?
Well, I actually have an entrepreneurial background. People assume I always worked for Tedeschi's. I didn't. Actually, right out of college, I started one of the first computer businesses in the area. And we did very well with the business until the computer industry computers became commodities. Mm-hmm. And so then we struggled, and that's when I started working in financial services. But I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and it's sort of very much an entrepreneurial experience. So you have to gather a good group of folks around you. I've got a fantastic team. Reach out to people that you know and trust. As someone that's never been in politics before, that's obviously very important, just to sort of get the lay of the land. Met with Governor Baker several times and his team to sort of walk through it. And I always joke, I say, we didn't have a primary, Kevin, which is great. And we got into the race early. That was one of the reasons we did, is to potentially thwart off any potential primary opponents. That worked well. But I had to win the most important vote of all, a vote of one of my wife's. So brought my wife Kathy in. We met with the governor's team. And I said, listen, you're going to basically learn a lot about the process. At the end of the conversation on the way home, you and I are going to have a candid conversation. If you tell me you don't want me to do this, I'm not going to do it. It's something she's never been enamored with politics, but she knows a couple of things. My heart is in this. It's something I really want to do, and I don't want to have any regrets. And secondly, that I would do a great job serving this area. So it's very entrepreneurial. And, as I always say, retail, which is obviously in my background as well as CEO of Tedeschi's, and politics are a lot alike. At the end of the day, they're both about people. If you care about people, you can do well in either, Kevin. And if you don't, you really have no business being in either. I care about people.
When you're traveling around at events, meeting voters, what are they saying to you? What are their concerns?
So there's some things that are, you hear unanimously. They're sort of issues that permeate every area, every group, socioeconomic, and they're things like the opioid epidemic. There are very few people, including myself. I lost a nephew to a heroin overdose. I've got a sister that's a recovering opioid addict. And so there are very few places you go where you don't meet a person or people that don't have some sort of personal experience with the opioid epidemic. So that's one that's everywhere. Beyond that, people are fed up with the partisan bickering. They see what's going on in Capitol Hill. There's a reason that Congress has a dismal 19% approval rating. And we have folks like Congressman Keating. He's a 41-year politician, served 4 terms looking for his 5th, that seem more interested in doing the bidding of their party. He votes with his party over 95% of the time, ranked as the most partisan member of the Massachusetts delegation, 364th in the in all of Congress. That's the bottom 16%. And they're ready for a change, and they realize it's time for a change. I believe in term limits. For one thing, I signed a pledge. I'll serve no more than 3 terms in the lower house of Congress. And I think that does a couple of things. A, it'll get our elected officials more focused on doing the work of the people again, number one. And 2, it'll get the influence of big money out of the equation. I think that's also very important. So those are the couple of things. Beyond that, it gets more regional. Certainly down the Cape, we've got the issue with the bridges. People are wondering what the future of the bridges is going to be. They're in disrepair. They're over 80 years old, probably reaching end of life. But the fact is, we don't know for sure. If elected, I promise by the end of my first term, the people of the Cape and this area will know the status of the bridges, what it's going to cost to maintain them, and how much longer we'll maintain them before replacing them. They deserve to know that. Education, there's a lot of issues. But I'm also a small business person. I appreciate the fact that 90% of the new jobs created in this district are created at the hands of small business. I want to do whatever I can to help support them as well.
Most folks feel that our government is broken, especially down in our nation's capital. What can be done to help fix Congress, that area, that branch of government?
So it's pretty apparent that what's happened is we've had sort of both sides, and let's not cast blame on either party here. Mm-hmm. Both have some ownership in this, but they've gone to their corners. And it's one of the reasons why I think term limits is important, but people often ask me, Kevin, they say, what's the first piece of legislation you'd work on when you go to Capitol, day one? I say, it's really not a piece of legislation at all, but it's necessary in order to get legislation passed that would help the people of this district. And basically it's going down and getting to know people, developing relationships across the aisle and across the country, so that someone that's Republican or Democrat in Iowa can understand why issues of things like coastal resiliency are important to a district like mine, why they should care. And in return, they know that they'll get a fair hearing when they come to me. It's not quid pro quo, but that's what we need. Someone just be open-minded about these things and do the right thing. So it's about developing relationships and going against your own party. I've said some things, and I'm willing to do some things that don't necessarily jibe with my party's position. I'm okay with that. Because I believe they're the right thing to do and in the best interest of the people that I would serve.
It seems to me as though that there's a lack of common ground. I think that's what you're basically saying is there's a lack of common ground when there was a day and an age that you could be a moderate, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, but that folks don't want to lose and they don't want to give any ground. How do you change that mindset when it comes to electing folks?
Well, a couple. Again, I hate to harp on term limits, but I really do believe that term limits would help do that. Because if you know you're only going to serve, let's say, 3 terms in the lower house of Congress, PACs are not going to be as interested in investing in you, which is a great thing. Big money is going to be more sort of out of the equation or mitigated. And you're going to start focusing on what's your legacy and focusing on the thing you're supposed to be focused on, and that is the people you represent. That's number one. Number 2, I think we just need to start focusing on the things that unite us rather than the things that divide us. And right now, the news, the media, folks, parties, both parties, seem to be looking for the things that divide us. Let's just take a time out here, recalibrate, and start focusing on the things we need to do as Americans, not Democrats, not Republicans, but Americans, to stop moving the agenda for the American people and the people of this district forward again.
Talk to me about the importance of education, especially when it comes to our state's economy and the workforce, whether it's now or the foreseeable future.
Couple things. Education, it's just way too expensive. Way too expensive coming out of the gate. We need to take a look at things. I'm not in favor of necessarily forgiving student loans. But I've got someone in my office that's part of my campaign who's paying 11%. He's got a good credit rating, young guy, paying 11% in student loans. That's ridiculous. We certainly need to take a close look at that. And we need to do the things we can to try to drive down the cost of higher education. And also let's appreciate the fact that higher education and opportunities may mean different things for different people. Businesses I talk to, particularly places down the Cape where there's a lot of building going on, there is a lack of folks that are skilled to meet the needs and demands of the trades, whether it's plumbing, HVAC, electrical, carpentry. And so when we look, fast forward a little bit, technology can certainly replace a lot of different skill sets that are out there. We may have autonomous trucks in the foreseeable future replacing trucking. Okay, let me tell you something, Kevin. It's going to be a long time before technology is able to replace what a plumber can do, an electrician can do, an HVAC. So I think we need to look at vocational opportunities. We need to do more. So there's collaborative efforts going on between our community colleges and some of our private universities. And then something else that Governor Baker has been pushing, and that is allowing students in high schools to start earning college credits while they're still in high school. All these things combined could help sort of offer other opportunities to people. Not everyone wants to, needs to, or necessarily should just automatically go into a 4-year college. So we need to be mindful of that, and we need to do the things we can to make it more accessible and affordable for those that do want to take that route. But it's critically important for the future of our business environment here in this district.
Immigration still remains a hotly contested issue. I know that it was something that's been discussed during this the close of this legislative session down in D.C. What needs to be done for everybody to put their collective heads together, forge ahead with some kind of legislation that'll make it to the president's desk to be signed into law?
So I think when it comes to things like immigration, I think we need to be fair and pragmatic about this. This is one of those things where we've just kicked this can down the road for way too long, and that's why we are where we are, and people are frustrated, and people seem to just be willing to throw their hands up in the air. That's nonsense. We need to get our arms around this. Number one responsibility of the folks that we elected is to keep us safe, and to me, that starts with securing our border. What does that look like? I'm willing to look at all the options, but we need to secure our border. And by the way, we need to support law enforcement and the folks the federal agents, they're responsible for keeping our border secure. Recently, my opponent had an opportunity to vote in support of those federal agents. He didn't vote for it, didn't vote against them. He voted present. Think about that, present. Now, even when I was CEO of my family's business, if I took a pass on a vote that was that important, family or not, if I took that vote today, I'd be out of a job tomorrow. That's just wrong. Then beyond that, we need to be fair and pragmatic about what we do with the folks that are here today. For the folks that we consider DACA recipients, I'm in favor of giving them a pathway to citizenship. I only ask two things: pay their own way and obey our laws. For the older folks that came here as adults, knowing that they were breaking the law, maybe some of the parents of DACA recipients or grandparents, I'm not in favor of allowing them to become citizens. I am in favor of giving them a pathway to permanent residency. So they'll never be able to vote. But again, just two requirements: pay your own way and respect our laws. And if they're able to do that, we can start making progress in this regard.
What about safe communities? We know that there was an ongoing dialogue over the past couple of years with the administration and communities that would harbor individuals who are here illegally.
I'm against sanctuary cities because I do not believe that keeps our citizens, our people safe. That's the number one responsibility. Again, I want to be fair and pragmatic about this, but I have limits, and sanctuary cities are just a non-starter for me.
Okay. Let's talk about the district, especially when it comes to infrastructure. We know that's something that's usually talked about a lot on the state level, whether it was under the Patrick administration and continuing on to the Baker administration. Where do you stand in regards to trying to get the necessary infrastructure dollars and bring that home to your district and the state?
Sure. It's very important. The district that I am looking to represent, 46 towns, nearly 80% of them are coastal. That comes with some very unique opportunities, but some challenges as well.
Sure.
Rising sea levels, coastal resiliency come to mind. We need to be doing a lot better working with the Army Corps of Engineers and other federal agencies to ensure that we've got funding to proactively ensure that our seawalls are safe, not crumbling. Let's not wait till they collapse. And then we have proper water mitigation. So when we have a rising tide, a storm like we had a couple of last winter, when we have water coming ashore affecting people, businesses, homes, that we're able to get that water out of the streets as quickly as possible. There's no action there. It's a response. We wait for something to happen before we do it. We should be looking at those seawalls and acting in a proactive way with the Army Corps of Engineers to fix them. Other areas of opportunity, again, those bridges. people should know that's the lifeblood for the Cape, which, by the way, is $1 billion a year tourism industry, most of it down the Cape. That's the economic engine for a lot of this area. And there's incredible uncertainty because of those bridges. People deserve better than that. So we need to get our arms around it. It's the responsibility of our legislators to do that. I was just down in Plymouth recently, and for Plymouth Harbor, they have the Plymouth 400 coming up pretty soon, 400th anniversary.
Big event.
Big event, huge for Plymouth. And you know, part of what's necessary to prepare for that is to ensure that there's proper dredging so that the Mayflower 2 can come in. And you know, it's funny because I was at an event and they were the LG Lieutenant Governor Polito was there, and she presented a check for about $2.5 million to the town of Plymouth that they would have to match and agreed to match for dredging. And then they mentioned while we were there that they had also secured over $10 million from the federal government for dredging. But the person that got that for them was actually Senator Markey, and he had a representative there. If I was the congressional representative representing Plymouth, I would have been the one pushing and fighting to make sure. That's how important it is. So again, you know, I give Senator Markey credit. He got them the money for it, but you know, he shouldn't have had to do it. He's got a much larger area to worry about. If I was representing this area, that would be one of my primary focuses, is to make sure that we have adequate funding so that we have the infrastructure and we're being proactive about dealing with its dredging, seawalls, bridges, and the like.
If I can build off of something that you had mentioned, that's America's hometown, celebrating 400 years coming up in 2020. Has anybody bent your ear in regards to the insufficient amount of monies that have been kind of put towards that celebration that they're trying to put together?
You know, people are trying to be respectful about it, but I do get the sense that there is a bit of frustration that there's not the level of support that an event this large and this importance should warrant. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. And you talking as far as floodplains, you talk about coastlines, the National Flood Insurance Program, which has been, it seems as though there's been a struggle to put a budget together, and there's been a struggle to at least put together a comprehensive long-term plan in this regards. It's been continued. What's your understanding of it, and what would you like to see done?
So when you look at how people in this district are charged for flood insurance, we are disproportionately charged because of the way the floodplains are mapped. There's different things like the Monomoy project, things like that, that basically help to provide insurance for nearly 60% of the folks that live down the Cape, for example, where they normally wouldn't be able to even afford insurance. We need to have someone fighting for the people of this district to take a look at it and to make sure the floodplains are drawn in a fair, equitable, and reasonable way. And today they're just not, and no one's fighting for them. I would be fighting for them. I would consider that to be one of my primary responsibilities.
Staying with the coastlines and actually going with another industry. Have you had any conversations, or where do you stand when it comes to the fishing industry and catch limits? Because I know that's kind of big as well.
It is. The fishing industry is of great importance to our area. New Bedford, #1 fishing port in the country. And again, we don't, our current congressman has been absent in terms of helping our fishermen. Recently, he had an opportunity to vote for reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. For those that don't know, basically what it does is it sets reasonable and more real-time catch limits on the species they can catch, how much of those species they can catch, and it does so on a more regulated basis based on real numbers, real science. Congressman Keating had an opportunity to vote in support of that, which would have been helpful and fair and equitable to our fishermen. He chose to vote against it. But just to the north, we have another congressional representative, Congressman Lynch. He's in the 8th District, represents Scituate and some other coastal areas where fishing is also important. He did the right thing. He went against his party and voted for it. We need people that are willing to do the right thing for the folks they represent and not just carry water for their party. So the fishing industry is very important. I meet with different groups who represent everything from lobstermen, shell fishermen, and regular fishermen that do draggers, for example, spent a night on a trawler just learning and listening. And, look, we're not just talking about fishermen here. We're talking about people that process the fish.
That's right.
Make the nets, fix the nets, repair the boats, sell the fuel, make the ice. At the end of the day, we're not just talking about a group or a business. We're talking about people, Kevin, trying to put food on their families' tables. And someone needs to be fighting for them, and no one's fighting them today.
Okay. Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned the opioid epidemic. This is something that it's beyond the Commonwealth. It's something that is affecting the entire country. What role do you feel the federal government should take in assisting states tackle this issue?
So, great question. First of all, I want to give Governor Baker a lot of credit for what he's done. I think one of the best things he's done, too, is to, in some ways, destigmatize this illness. That has allowed people with this illness to come out of the shadows for the first time, to actually put their hand up, get the help they need and deserve. So that's number one. Number two, I would love to be able to be someone who can work with Governor Baker on Capitol Hill. He's actually on the President's Opioid Task Force, to help him take what we've done in Massachusetts and implement it nationally, number one, but number two, ensure that Massachusetts is getting the funding it needs to have longer stays. Because right now it's like a mill. We have people come in for 7 to 10 days and we send them out as if that's going to be enough. That's not enough. We've proven they need at least 30 days in many cases to have a good shot of not relapsing again. And then make sure that once they're out and about, after they've received the help they need, that we're following up with them to make sure they're getting the psychological support they need. Maybe it's vocational training, because a lot of the issues that these folks are dealing with are issues we just can't see. We need to be mindful of that and need to help them. And it's a morally right thing to do. And for those who would say, well, that's not my issue, it is your issue. Because these are families that are being adversely affected. And by the way, there's also a huge cost to our society not dealing with it. So if the moral issue is not strong enough for you, and it should be, there are financial issues as well that we could spell out.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Governor Baker, who, upon taking office, first thing he did was form a working group of folks, whether it was on the law enforcement level, folks who were dealing with it in municipalities, clinicians, folks who specialized in it, and basically went around the Commonwealth talking to people, and has put a couple of laws on the books to kind of help folks. And also, let's not forget, instead of somebody who is dealing with a drug issue, instead of them going to court, there's a drug court where at least they understand what's going on with the individual, and that it's more that it's not just someone it's criminal intent, but in fact that it's more drug induced.
So, and along those lines, just earlier in the week, I spent quite a bit of time visiting and touring the Plymouth County Correctional Facility.
Yep.
And
Sheriff Joe McDonald.
Sheriff Joe, great guy, does a fantastic.
He sat on that commission.
Yes. Well, I got to tell you, I was thoroughly impressed with so many of the things they do there. And one of the things I was very impressed with is how they dealt with folks that came in with addictive issues, whether it be alcohol, opioids, or and the like. And they were not only mindful of it, but I felt they were doing the best that they could do to help tackle it, to give these folks the best chance to live a normal life after they got out. And it was encouraging, and it was impressive.
Probably allows me to segue into healthcare. We know that this has been an ongoing struggle ever since the Affordable Care Act was passed under Barack Obama, President Barack Obama, and that some aspects of it have been repealed since Donald Trump has taken office. What needs to be done when it comes to affordable health care, and also the drug when it comes to affordable prescriptions?
So, when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, probably, there's been a lot of good things that have come of it. Pre-existing conditions being addressed. I mean, that is great. No one can argue that's not good. More people having access to more affordable health care. That's all well good. The problem is the Affordable Care Act, the way it was implemented, it's actually driven costs up for health care.
Yeah.
And it's unsustainable. So there's a few things we can do. If we want to ensure that there's going to be health care that's going to be available for all Americans moving forward, we have to do a few things. A, tort reforms. Tort reforms, basically, it's how we deal with lawsuits, malpractice, and things like that. Malpractice insurance is one of the big drivers, especially in the OB and other types of specialties, that drives up the cost of health care. So we need some tort reforms. Of course, most of the folks in Congress are going to fight that because they're attorneys. And guess what they want to do when they are no longer in Congress? So that's number one. Number two, we need more transparency, Kevin. You know how much it costs to get your oil change in your car? And that may be a driving factor that determines where you go to get your oil changed.
Correct, yep.
Shouldn't you know how much it costs to get your hip replaced or
Absolutely.
knee replaced or heart surgery at Hospital X versus Hospital Y? Absolutely. And by the way, you should also know the level of success that those hospitals have with those various types of operations. And then we need to look at things like allowing people to buy, whether it's prescriptions or whether it's getting health care rather across state lines. All these things create more of a competitive environment, and we know that we have a competitive environment, it's going to lower costs naturally. So, I think things like supporting community health centers, I think those are a great way for us in the longer term to provide lower cost health care, where maybe people can go to one of those areas instead of showing up at an emergency room where the cost of care is going to be exorbitant compared to what it might be at a community health care center.
Peter, we just got a couple of minutes left. We've really talked up here.
That was quick.
It was quick. Is there something we haven't? Is there an issue or topic we haven't touched upon, but you want to take a moment to talk about?
Look, I just want to encourage people to get out and vote. It's important that people get out there. And so if you're happy with the way things are, if the polarity, the partisan bickering in Capitol Hill, if you're okay with that, I'm probably not your guy. But if, like me, you think it's time for change and we need people who are going to start focusing on doing your work again as opposed to the bidding of the party, and those are the special interest groups, I'm the guy that wants to do that. I would be honored to represent this area that I am proud to call home. And, it's one of those things. One of the reasons I'm running is if I didn't do this, Kevin, I would regret it the rest of my life. I would welcome the opportunity to represent the people of this district.
And if folks want to find out more about you, your campaign, maybe they want to get involved?
Sure, be great. And then go to TedeschiForCongress.com. We have an office. Our main office is right in Pembroke. We'd love to have you come down, grab a lawn sign, certainly donate if you like what you hear. And come on out. We have standouts all the time. The best part of the process is the people we've met along the way. I've been blessed. Not only do I have a great staff, a great organization working with me to support me every day, but some wonderful people that believe in what I stand for and are trying to do everything they can to help me get elected.
Well, Peter, thank you for coming in.
Kevin, my pleasure.
Sitting down and talking. And you've been watching WHCA's Conversations with the Candidates. And today we've been privileged to speak with Peter Tedeschi, who is a Republican candidate who is running for the U.S. Representative seat, the 9th Massachusetts District. Remember, get out and vote November 6th. And if you can't vote that day, grab an absentee ballot. It's not that hard. So until next time,